Dr. Sarah Chen had been stationed on the frontier medical outpost Meridian for 18 months, and in that time she had treated more species than she could count. The outpost sat at the edge of known space, a neutral zone where refugees, traders, and travelers from across the galaxy came for medical care, no questions asked. She had set broken crystalline limbs on silicon-based Korath. She had performed emergency surgeries on Trilaxian diplomats whose biology required her to work in sub-zero temperatures. She had even delivered a Korthine baby, which involved more tentacles than she cared to remember. But nothing in her extensive xenomedicine training had prepared her for the small Velken boy who sat in examination room 4, kicking his legs against the medical chair and clutching a worn stuffed animal that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a starfish. His name was Jem. At least that was what the intake coordinator had written on his chart. The Velken were a species she had only read about in medical databases. They were rare this far from their home system, known for their distinctive features: smooth, slate-gray skin, enormous amber eyes that took up nearly a third of their face, and delicate three-fingered hands that were said to be capable of incredible precision. The species had been flagged in recent Galactic Council reports as at risk, but the details were classified above her clearance level. Jem looked to be about 9 years old in human equivalent, though Velken aged differently. He was small for his species, according to the database, and thin enough that Sarah could see the outline of his rib cage through his simple refugee clothing. "Hello, Jem," Sarah said warmly as she entered the room, her tablet tucked under one arm. "I am Dr. Chen, but you can call me Sarah if that is easier." Jem looked up at her with those huge amber eyes. He did not smile, but he did not look frightened either. Just watchful, cautious in the way children became when they had learned too young that the world was not safe. "Hello, Dr. Sarah," he said softly. His voice had a slight harmonic quality, as if two tones were speaking simultaneously. "The intake nurse said you would check if I am healthy." "That is right," Sarah confirmed, pulling up a stool so she was not towering over him. "We do health checks for all new arrivals. It helps us make sure everyone is feeling okay and gets any medicine or care they might need. Does that sound all right?" Jem nodded slowly. "Will it hurt?" "No," Sarah promised. "I will tell you before I do anything, and if something feels uncomfortable, you can tell me to stop. Okay?" For the first time, something like relief crossed the boy's face. "Okay." Sarah began with the basics. She checked his temperature, which ran cooler than humans but within normal range for Velken. She listened to his dual-chambered heart, the rhythm strange but steady. She examined his eyes with a light, noting some scarring on the retinas that suggested malnutrition at some point, but nothing currently threatening his vision. She checked his mouth and throat, his ears, the lymph nodes along his neck. Everything was proceeding routinely. Jem sat still and cooperative, clutching his stuffed animal the entire time. "You are doing great," Sarah encouraged. "Just a few more things. I need to check your reflexes and then look at your hands and feet to make sure everything is working properly. Is that okay?" Jem hesitated for the first time. His amber eyes dropped to his hands, which were hidden in the long sleeves of his oversized shirt. "My hands?" "Yes, just to check your circulation and joint mobility. It is very quick, I promise." The boy sat very still for a long moment. Then, slowly, he set down his stuffed animal and began to roll up his right sleeve. Sarah smiled encouragingly, preparing to take his hand and check the flexibility of those delicate three-fingered appendages. Then she saw. Sarah's smile froze. Her breath stopped. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Jem's hand was a ruin. The smooth gray skin was covered in marks, burns, cuts, punctures, each finger bent at angles that were not quite natural. The webbing between his fingers was scarred tissue, some of it still showing signs of relatively recent trauma. His tiny wrist bore circular marks that could only have come from restraints worn for extended periods. But it was not just damage, it was systematic, precise. The burns were evenly spaced, the cuts followed patterns. Someone had not just hurt this child, someone had done this deliberately, methodically, over a long period of time. And as Jem rolled up his left sleeve, Sarah saw that hand was just as bad, perhaps worse. Two of his fingers on the left hand were clearly broken and had healed incorrectly, giving them a twisted appearance. Sarah realized she had been silent too long. Jem was looking at her with confusion, his head tilted slightly. "Dr. Sarah, are you okay?" The question was so absurd, so backwards, that it nearly broke her. Here was a child whose hands had been systematically destroyed, asking if she was okay. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to force her training to override her horror. "Jem," she said, and her voice came out rough. "Sweetheart, what happened to your hands?" Jem looked down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. He turned them over slowly, examining the scarred palms and twisted fingers. "Oh," he said simply, "these are my skill marks. Every Velken child gets them. It is how we learn our purpose." "Skill marks," Sarah repeated slowly. She felt like she was moving through water, everything slow and distorted. "Yes," Jem explained patiently. "See, the masters say Velken hands are special. We can do very detailed work that other species cannot. So when we are young, we go to the learning facilities, and they teach us our skills." Sarah's medical scanner sat forgotten on the counter. Her hands were shaking. "Teach you how?" Jem seemed confused by the question, as if the answer should be obvious. "With the tools. If you do the work wrong, they use the teaching tools to help you remember not to make that mistake again." He pointed to a particularly vicious burn scar across his palm. "This one I got when I was 6. I was learning to sort microcomponents for navigation systems. I dropped 3 pieces in one day. The supervisor said I needed a strong lesson so I would develop steadier hands." He held up his left hand with the broken fingers. "This one was from last year. I was too slow at my station. I had to meet quota, but my hands were tired. The master said tiredness is just weakness leaving the body, so he helped correct my weakness." The boy spoke with no emotion, no distress. He was reciting facts, explaining something he believed was normal, universal, just part of growing up. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. "How long?" she asked quietly. "Were you at these learning facilities?" "Since I was 4, Jem said. All Velken children go at 4. We stay until we are 16, or until we earn enough skill marks to be assigned to a work vessel. I was assigned 3 months ago. I was on a cargo ship, but there was an accident. The ship had to stop here for repairs, and I ran away." His voice dropped to a whisper on those last words, and for the first time Sarah saw fear in his eyes. "I know I am not supposed to run away. Work assignments are forever. But I was so tired, Dr. Sarah. My hands hurt all the time, and the supervisor on the ship said if I could not keep up my speed, I would need remedial lessons. I got scared. I'm sorry. I'm a bad Velken." "No," Sarah said, and the word came out fierce, hard. "No, Jem, you are not bad. You are not bad. What was done to you, what they call skill marks and teaching, that is not teaching. That is torture. That is abuse." Jem stared at her. But all Velken children, not all children," Sarah interrupted. She was on her knees now at eye level with the small boy. "Just Velken children?" "Yes," Jem said slowly. "The Velken Confederation has the learning facilities. The Galactic Council knows about them. Lots of species use Velken workers because our hands are so skilled. We are valuable." "You are valuable because you are a person," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "Not because of what your hands can do. You are valuable because you exist, because you are a child who deserves to be safe and happy and loved." Jem's amber eyes were huge, confused. "I do not understand." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I know you do not. But I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that?" Slowly, Jem nodded. Sarah stood. Her hands were steady now, steadied by purpose, by a rage so cold and focused it felt like ice in her veins. She walked to the communication panel on the wall and entered her emergency medical code. The screen flickered to life. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief Medical Officer of Meridian Outpost, requesting immediate priority connection to Terran Fleet Command." The operator's face appeared on screen. Olisor, young man who looked surprised by the emergency code. "Dr. Chen, this channel is for critical situations requiring military—" "I know what this channel is for," Sarah cut him off. I am invoking Article 7 of the Terran Protection Mandate. I have a child victim of systematic torture. I need to speak to Admiral Okoye immediately." The operator's expression changed instantly. Article 7 had only been invoked twice in the history of the Terran Protection Mandate. Both times it had resulted in significant military action. "Stand by," the operator said, "connecting you now." While she waited, Sarah returned to Jem. The boy was watching her with wide eyes. "Am I in trouble?" he asked in a small voice. "No, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "You are not in trouble. You are never going to be in trouble again. But those people, the ones who hurt you, they are going to be in a lot of trouble." The screen behind her chimed. Sarah turned to see the face of Admiral Diane Okoye, the highest-ranking officer in this sector of Terran Fleet Command. The admiral was a woman in her 60s with dark skin, silver hair, and eyes that had seen decades of combat. "Dr. Chen," the admiral said. "Report." Sarah took a breath. She needed to be clear, factual, professional, but as she looked at Jem's ruined hands, at his confused, innocent face, something in her voice betrayed the fury beneath. "Admiral, I have a 9-year-old Velken child in my care. His hands have been systematically tortured since he was 4 years old. Burns, breaks, cuts, all deliberate, all part of what his people call skill training. He describes facilities where all Velken children are sent. He says the Galactic Council knows about this. He says multiple species benefit from this system." The admiral's expression did not change, but Sarah saw her jaw tighten. "Show me." Sarah gently turned Jem toward the screen and carefully held up his small hands to the camera. The boy did not resist, though he looked confused about what was happening. The admiral stared at the screen for a long moment, then she leaned forward. "Son," she said directly to Jem, her voice surprisingly gentle. "What is your name?" "Jem," the boy said quietly. "Worker designation J-7392. "Your name is Jem," the admiral corrected firmly. "Just Jem. Can you tell me, Jem, how many other children were at your learning facility?" Jem thought about this. "Thousands," he said. "We had big dormitories. My section had 300 children, but there were many sections. And do you know how many learning facilities exist?" Jem nodded. 12 main facilities on the Velken homeworld, and 6 regional facilities on colony worlds. Every Velken child goes to one. The admiral sat back in her chair. "Dr. Chen, secure that child. Maximum protection protocols. I am initiating a full intelligence review of the Velken Confederation and their labor systems." "How long will that take?" Sarah asked. The admiral's smile was cold. "About 6 hours, long enough to move the Third Fleet into position." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Admiral, I need to know, what does Article 7 authorization allow you to do?" The admiral's eyes were hard as steel. "Article 7 allows me to treat systematic child torture as an act of war. Dr. Chen, in 6 hours I'm going to politely ask the Velken Confederation to immediately shut down every single one of their learning facilities and release every child in their custody. And if they refuse, then they will learn what happens when you hurt children in human protected space. Every ship in this fleet carries personnel who are parents, aunts, uncles, people who understand that children are precious. When they see what I am about to show them, when they see that boy's hands, there will not be a force in this galaxy that can protect the Velken Confederation from human fury." Sarah looked at Jem, who was watching the screen with confusion. He did not understand what was happening. He did not understand that his normalized horror was about to spark an interstellar incident. He did not understand that the scars on his hands were about to change galactic policy. He just knew that the human doctor had promised he would not be hurt anymore, and he chose to believe her. "Admiral," Sarah said quietly, "I am sending you full medical scans and documentation. You will have everything you need." "Received," the admiral confirmed. "Doctor, you did the right thing. That child will never go back. None of them will." The screen went dark. Sarah turned back to Jem and knelt down again. She carefully, gently, took his ruined hands in hers. The boy flinched slightly, clearly expecting pain, but Sarah just held them softly. "Jem," she said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What was done to you was wrong. It was evil. No matter what anyone told you, no matter what you were taught, children should never be hurt like this. You did nothing to deserve this. You were perfect exactly as you were. Tears were forming in Jem's amber eyes. But the master said, "The masters were wrong," Sarah said firmly, "and they are going to answer for what they did. But right now, I need you to know something. You are safe. You are under human protection now. And humans have one absolute rule that we never, ever break. We protect children, all children, from any species, no matter what. Do you understand?" Jem nodded, tears now streaming down his gray cheeks. "I am safe." "You are safe," Sarah promised, "and every single child in those facilities is going to be safe too. Because of you, because you were brave enough to run away, because you trusted me enough to show me your hands. You just saved thousands of children, Jem. You are a hero." The boy collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Sarah held him, this small broken child who had been taught that his only value was in his ability to endure pain and perform labor. She held him and let him cry, perhaps for the first time in his life, where someone had told him his tears were justified. Hours later, Sarah stood in the observation deck of Meridian outpost, watching through the viewport as ships began to appear. One by one, the vessels of the Terran Third Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, dozens of them, taking up position in a formation that was clearly military, clearly intentional. On the communication channels, she could hear the carefully polite but absolutely firm message being transmitted to the Velken Confederation. "This is Admiral Diane Okoye of the Terran Fleet. We are aware of the systematic abuse occurring in your child labor facilities. You have 12 hours to begin shutdown procedures and release all children to neutral custody. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action under the Terran Protection Mandate Article 7. We strongly recommend compliance." The response from the Velken Confederation came within an hour. It was bureaucratic, defensive, full of explanations about cultural practices and economic necessity and Galactic Council approval. Admiral Okoye's response was brief. "Your cultural practices end where child torture begins. You now have 11 hours. Choose wisely." Sarah did not know how it would end. She did not know if the Velken Confederation would comply or if the fleet would actually have to take military action. But she knew with absolute certainty that those children were coming out of those facilities, one way or another. Because humans had been many things throughout their history. They had been warriors and explorers, artists and scientists. But the one thing that united humanity across all cultures, all nations, all eras, was the bone-deep instinct to protect the helpless. Hurt a human child and you would face justice. Hurt any child in front of a human and you would face fury. Behind her, the door to the observation deck opened. Jem stepped in, his hands now carefully bandaged. Sarah had spent 2 hours treating them, applying regenerative therapies that would help but could not undo years of damage. He would need surgery, physical therapy, time, but he would heal. He walked up beside her and looked out at the fleet. "Are those ships here because of me?" he asked quietly. "They are here because of you and every child like you," Sarah confirmed. Jem was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Do you really think they can save them?" "All of them?" Sarah looked down at the small boy, at his bandaged hands and hopeful eyes. Then she looked back at the fleet, at the dozens of warships now positioned like a wall between the Velken Confederation and any chance of continuing their atrocities. "Yes," she said with absolute conviction, "I really think they can. And I think the entire galaxy is about to learn something very important about humanity." "What is that?" Jem asked. Sarah smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen evil and knew it was about to face consequences. They are about to learn that there is nothing, absolutely nothing, more dangerous in this galaxy than a human who has decided to protect a child. The fleet hung in space, silent and waiting. And throughout the galaxy, in 12 main facilities and 6 regional facilities, thousands of Velken children waited too, not yet knowing that their nightmare was about to end. not yet knowing that one small boy had been brave enough to show his hands to a human doctor, not yet knowing that humanity had looked at their suffering and said no more. Never again. Not on our watch. This is Sleep Sci-Fi Stories. If this story moved you, there are more where that came from. Stories of humanity's compassion, our fury, our unwavering protection of the innocent. Subscribe and let us know in the comments what you think should happen next to the Velken Confederation.